In this episode, I talk about the good, the bad, and everything I've learned over the course of owning a Sparx since they launched on Kickstarter. So, to kind of give a quick explainer for those of you who don't know what a Sparx is, or maybe you do and you don't know all the bits and pieces of it, I'm going to start there. What is a Sparx skate sharpener? The Sparx is a self contained portable skate sharpener. It's a sharpener, not a re-edger. A lot of people get those confused. Re-edgers are those small handheld tools that you keep in your bag to just kind of do a little touch up on your skates between sharpenings. And what those do is they don't really sharpen anything. They just kind of fold the metal on your blades back into shape. They're not meant to really cut any metal like a sharpener does. So they're really just for a little touch up, or if you realize, hey, my skates feel really bad and I can't run out before a game and get them sharpened, you can use one of those re-edger tools. The Sparx is an actual full-on sharpener. It cuts steel. It grinds it down and cuts steel. There have been 3 different generations of the Sparx sharpeners since they came out in 2015, 2016 via Kickstarter. Like I said, that's where I got mine, directly from the Kickstarter. So I have kind of the oldest you can get, the Gen 1. In that time, they've also done pro and consumer models. They're not that different. They work exactly the same way, use the exact same hardware and the same accessories and everything. But the big differences are the pro models have a larger, sturdier base because they're meant to just kind of sit in a pro shop or, a hockey store or something like that and not really move anywhere. They're not going any places. And also, the pro models have a way to attach vacuum to the base. That way, you can get out all the little metal shavings a lot easier. Whereas the consumer models just have a filter in there because it's a consumer model. They don't expect you to sharpen nearly as many skates as the pro models do. Now, all the Spark sharpeners, all generations, use the same proprietary ring system for sharpening. And the way those work is they're little rings that every ring is a different hollow. And so when you want to change out hollows, you just change out rings and it sharpens to a different hollow. They also have their own fire sharpening, which is the Sparx version of a flat bottom profile. So it's very similar to like the flat bottom V profile, it's just their version of it. So that gives you kind of the overview of what actually is a Sparx sharpener. So how do I use my Sparx? Like I said, I've had it since the Kickstarter, so I've had it for about 8 years now. It's just a consumer model, not a pro model or anything. So it's just one you could go buy in a store or anybody can buy online. With it, I've sharpened obviously my own skates. I think I was adding up about 17 other people's skates that I've sharpened. There may be a couple more in there, but I think it's like 17 people. And whenever I sharpen people's skates, especially if I'm sharpening them for the first couple times, I always ask for feedback. Make sure that what they think of them. Never had anybody say that they've gotten a bad sharpen or they don't feel right or something. Honestly, the only negative feedback I've gotten is I did have a couple people say that they felt too sharp. And I don't know if that's because of the hollow that I put on them. Maybe it was different what they were getting, because a lot of beer leaguers, when they go get their skate sharpened, they don't say what hollow they want. They just say whatever, whatever the store does, which is usually like a half or a 5/8. Kind of depends where you're going. So I might have done a different one for them because they didn't know. That's my assumption, but I consider too sharp to not really be an issue. Now with Sparx, one of the things that you can adjust and you should adjust is how many passes the sharpening wheel makes on a blade. And generally they recommend something between 4 and 6 passes for a regular sharpening. It's 10 possibly if you're doing a brand new hollow on some steel, or you have completely unsharpened steel, fresh out of the package. Now myself, when I sharpen my own skates, I sharpen them every 2 to 3 games. So for me, that's every 2-ish hours of skating approximately. And I usually do 2 passes on there. And that seems to be great. For most other people, when I do their skates, unless I see any issues with stuff, I usually go with 4. And that seems to work out just fine. I also, when I'm sharpening blades, I never try to fix issues. If people have like big nicks or gouges in their blades, I tell them you got to take them to a person. You know, I know that technically, if you have a nick, I could sharpen the blade down past that nick, or if there's a gouge or something like that in it, and take care of it. But one, I don't want to, use up a ton of the sharpening wheel for who knows how many passes that's going to take if it's not right on the edge. And also, I don't know that that necessarily take care of it. I think it would. In my head, that makes sense, but I don't know. So I do tell people, if you have something like that, I'm not going to sharpen them. Take them to a person. I also, in all the sharpenings I've done for myself, for other people, we've never noticed any kind of change to profiles. That is something I know people mention with their Sparx, is that they're worried that using a Sparx machine is going to change your profile. But it really shouldn't do that, because the way it works, it's all off of spring tension. That's what holds the wheel against the blade as it's sharpening. And as long as you set it right, set the height right, that you're not, really jamming into that steel, it should not change it at all. It should actually change the profile less than a manual sharpening, where you're counting on someone applying extremely even pressure as they go past the wheel. Every time before I sharpen a new set of steel on the Sparx, and by new, I mean change somebody else's steel or doing mine after doing someone else's, I always check for the wheel height and adjust it as needed. A lot of times it doesn't need adjusting, but I always check. It takes a couple minutes. I also listen as I sharpen skates, at least on the first couple passes. I always make sure I listen. You can definitely hear a sound change if there's something wrong with the blade, even if it's minor. You can usually tell if somebody stepped on concrete or has a small nick in there or something like that. And if I hear a new noise while it's sharpening and it's not corrected in a pass or two, to me, that's a stop. Take a look, make sure everything's working correctly on the machine, everything's set up right. And if it is and it's still making that noise, to me, that's a red flag of, hey, have somebody else look at these things, not run it on the Sparx like that. I do also use a non-Sparx edge checker on anybody's blades but my own every single time I sharpen them. I do check mine pretty regularly, just not every time, but anybody else's skates that I do, I make sure to check it. It's pretty much always stays level. I have had adjusted a couple times over the years, but by a couple times, I mean 3 or 4 times over the years, and it's never that out of level. I also don't move my Sparx around. It stays in one spot. I'm sure if I start traveling with it, I would like to take it to places, then I will do a adjustment check and, still be checking for level every time I sharpen, because I'm sure jostling around, that's going to get a little bit out of a line. In that time, have found a few fiddly bits while working with the Sparx. It is a little fidgety to adjust the alignment on a Gen 1 machine. It involves using a special grinding wheel that's not really a grinding wheel, but it's a wheel and it's got a line all the way around it, and a magnifying glass device that sits where you clamp in the blade. You hit a button on the machine, it pulls that wheel in right next to the magnifying device, and then there is a plastic knob on the carriage that holds the sharpening wheel that you have to adjust kind of back and forth. You have to look directly over the machine, not at an angle, but directly down on it, and kind of visually line up like a little V notch and then a line. So not the easiest thing. I mean, it's not difficult to do, but it is very fiddly to check that. And I know people have put out what their guesstimates are of, if you do use an edge checker, how out of a line your edges are, with how many clicks one way or another you should have to adjust that wheel. It's a rough guideline. I've tried that. is not perfect, but it kind of gives you sort of an idea. So not great. But like I said, I don't have to adjust it very often. And that, to me, that's the fiddliest bit of dealing with the Gen 1. Now, the Gen 2 and Gen 3 machines, they have an adjustment tool instead of having that thumb screw that, to me, looks like a screwdriver that you use for changing your alignment. And I think Sparx has heard that this is a fiddly bit and kind of a pain for people. So that's why they came out with their new beam edge checker. And what that does is it drops on top of a blade, much the way these old school kind of edge checkers would. And it uses a laser beam to check for level, and then works with an app on your phone to tell you how many turns you have to turn your carriage and stuff back and forth with your adjustment tool to get it level. It tells you that. So you're not doing what I'm doing in my Gen 1 machine, which is visually checking. And then really I have to run a blade through there and then check it. So it's kind of saving all that and doing it with the smarts of the app. Haven't used it. Haven't used a Gen 2 or Gen 3 machine. Haven't used the beam edge checker. Seems like a cool idea though. And if it gets rid of that manual process, that's awesome. I will also say, along with that, just to throw out there for things that are on the newer machines that I have nothing to do with and I don't have any experience with, is, like I said, they have an app that works with that beam edge checker. That app also handles QR codes. They have QR code stickers they can put on skates. So that way you can keep track of who gets kind of what sharpening and stuff, which handy if you're sharpening a lot of people's skates, I guess. If you're kind of, sharpening your whole team skates, or you and your kids buddies or something like that skates, handy. I use a spreadsheet to handle all this stuff and look at it. And also pretty much everybody I know uses the generic hollows. So it's not that big of a deal. Now, changing the rings, super easy. So if you have to change hollows, it's really easy. They're, again, just a thumb screw that you pop on and off. Never have an issue with it. They're just really easy to do. The only thing I've ever run into, and this isn't even an issue, I don't think, is if you sharpen a lot of skates, like back to back to back to back to back, then one, the ring gets super hot. So if you have to change it, it's super hot. You don't want to touch it. And two, it can stick to the carriage. So that's been the only thing I've seen, but you have to sharpen a lot of skates in a row to have that be a thing. Or I guess if you did a ton of passes on a couple skates. So like I was saying earlier, how I don't like to try and fix and correct issues like huge nicks or gouges in steel. If you were trying to correct stuff like that and you had to do, 15, 20 passes, it probably would get super hot like that too and stick. Again, not a big deal. Wait a couple minutes, cools down, pops right off. But that's as fiddly as that gets. It's super easy. I mean, generally changing one of the wheels for me probably doesn't even take 30 seconds to do. It's a super, super quick process. Now, I see a lot of hate for Sparx machines online a lot of times, and I totally get it. I agree with people that it does not replace a good manual sharpening. I say good manual sharpening. It doesn't replace any manual sharpening, but good manual sharpenings. A trained equipment guy does a whole lot more than just sharpen a skate. They check the steel, check the skate, check rivets, give advice on hollows, tell you if certain things are breaking down. Hey, your tendon guard is starting to crack. You're going to need a new tongue, anything like that. They're going to do a whole bunch of other stuff besides just give you a good sharpening. Obviously, Sparx isn't doing that. It's not checking any of those things. And if you're only going to somebody that has a Sparx and they're not looking at your skate for anything, you're losing out on all of that knowledge, all of that info that you could be getting. So that is something you definitely lose having a Sparx versus going to a good equipment person that knows how to do a good sharpening. So, like I said previously, I'm not comfortable using the Sparx to correct any big issues with steel either. Anyone can get a Sparx, and you have a lot of people that are using them and not paying attention to how they use them. They don't do height checks. They don't check edge level. They don't listen to how the stuff gets sharpened. Nothing. They just drop in a skate, hit the big go button, walk away. The problem with that is a lot of stores are starting to use Sparx only for sharpenings. Like they don't have a way to do manual sharpenings. We just had a hockey store open up near me. It's great. We have a hockey store here now. They only have Sparx machines. They don't have anything else to sharpen skates with. And I've seen a lot of stores get away from having these machines because it takes time and expertise to learn how to use like a stand-up, like a Wasota machine to do that at all. Like you have to have somebody that knows what they're doing. And I've been turned away from like a Play It Again Sports to get my skate sharpened there back in the day because they're like, oh, the one guy that knows how to use the sharpener, he's not here today. That it alleviates from a store point, alleviates that problem completely because everybody should know how to drop a skate in and hit the play button. But unfortunately, that's all they teach people to do. So that's what a lot of people do. So then you get a lot of people see the Sparx being used and there's no care for anything. There's no couple minute looking stuff over before they sharpen and a couple minutes checking stuff afterwards. And then you get a crap sharpening. I mean, it's really easy to do that, but it has nothing to do with the Sparx. And then people blame it on the Sparx. It has nothing to do with that. You have people that wouldn't have been allowed to do skate sharpenings, a year ago or whatever before they got Sparx. And now they have a Sparx and they go, yeah, sure, anybody can do it. Day one, you can drop a skate on there and do it. Who cares? I think that's the biggest issue people have is a lot of these stores, especially, and I don't know about regular consumers having Sparx machines because I haven't talked to anybody else that has one, but a lot of these stores, they don't get any training on a Sparx. If you're doing the regular stand-up machine, you have a whole bunch of training and you trial and error a bunch of times. And, you're going through a bunch of iterations to make sure you know how to sharpen skates before you sharpen a customer's skates. Whereas now, I think they show you once. It's probably the first skate that comes in for the day they show you. And, yeah, there's nothing to it. So you get a crap sharpening out of it. Because it is totally possible to get a crap sharpening out of a Sparx. So I think that's where a lot of this hate comes from. Not from the Sparx, but from what it has, how lazy it has allowed places to get because they have them now. Right now, the Sparx isn't a completely, you buy it once, you're done, you don't have to buy anything else machine. It does require some consumables. And really, you do need to buy some accessories for it to actually get it to work at its fullest potential. First is obviously the grinding wheels. Right now, at the time of this recording, those wheels currently go for $70 US. They're available in very limited stores here in the States. I know in Canada, a couple of the big chain stores have them. But really, you have to buy them online and generally through Sparx. That means you're not really getting any kind of coupons or deals or anything with them. So they're pretty much always going to cost $70. I will say I do know that Sparx does about once or twice a year. They'll do something like free shipping on the wheels. So keep an eye out for deals like that. And I guess stock up if you're going to be using them. Because you have to get Sparx wheels. You can't get any kind of third-party wheels. There's no other entity out there making grinding wheels that work for a Sparx. You have to get the Sparx branded ones. The only ones that work, the only ones that exist. Now, the one upside with the wheels is they do last a pretty good amount of time. So you are going to get a lot of sharpenings out of one wheel, which is great. But that being said, one of the cool things about having a Sparx is you can try out different sharpenings pretty easily. But it's expensive to do that. If you're spending $70 to try out, one of the fire sharpenings and you realize, hey, I don't like this at all. Well, you're kind of spent $70 for sharpening your skates like once or twice. That kind of sucks. But, there's ways you can kind of go around that and talk about that a little later. Another great thing with the wheels is they are small and portable and easy to store. They're pretty sturdy. So if you are traveling with your Sparx, it's not like, like a flimsy sanding disc thing or anything that you're going to have with you, or some large case that you're going to have with all these wheels in it. They're actually pretty small, so you can take a lot of them with you. And pretty much any case that they have for Sparx that you would travel around with it, it's real easy to throw in, a dozen different hollows with no problem and take those with you. And they don't add a lot of weight or anything. So that is nice. The only other consumable that you have to get are filters. Now, again, this is only if you have the consumer model. If you have the pro model, you're probably having it hooked up to some sort of vacuum system, so you don't have to worry about the filtering as much, if there even are filters in it. But for the consumer model, you do have to have filters. Sparx does sell a little kit that's got a filter, a little cleaning cloth for the front glass, some lubrication for the skate clamp. It's a nice little kit. It's super easy to use all that stuff and to replace the filter. Not a big deal at all. It just pops in and out. If you clean out your machine somewhat regularly, then you shouldn't have to buy filters very often. I have seen people try and sometimes successfully make their own filters from like a house filter. But honestly, their little kit is not very expensive. And I think it's worth it to just buy theirs because it fits nicely. And like I said, if you keep the machine relatively clean, like you vacuum it every so often or get those little metal shavings out of there pretty regularly, you're not going to change the filter very often. In the 8 years I've owned it, I have had the warning come up once to change the filter. So I've only changed it once. And I don't vacuum it all the time. I don't vacuum it religiously or anything. But I do vacuum it pretty regularly. Probably every 10, 15 sharpenings, I'm in there vacuuming it out. So not a ton, but, it lasts. Now, an accessory that you really should get, but is not 100% required, is some kind of edge checker. Like I said, they have the new beam edge checker that comes with the Gen 3 machines. You can also buy it separately to use it with the Gen 1 or the Gen 2, or just if for some reason you want to check your edges and you don't own a Sparx, you can feel free to go buy one yourself and have a blast with it. The beam seems like it's really more of a Gen 2, Gen 3 thing because of how it interacts with the app and tells you how to adjust everything. So if you have a Gen 1 machine like myself, I don't know that spending the money on the beam is really worth it for that. So what I have is kind of the old school magnetic edge checker. It's two pieces of L-shaped metal with magnets that sit on your blade and check for level. It's super easy to use. You can buy them from all kinds of people. You can buy one from Sparx if you would like. You can buy one from just about any brand that makes the like stand-up skate sharpeners. No problem. You can buy those. Or you can do like what I did, buy a generic one off eBay for like a quarter of the price of those. They all work the same. But you really should get a edge level checker if you're going to use a Sparx or really any kind of skate sharpening machine at home, because you can't visually tell if the skates are level. No matter what you think, you can't visually tell just by looking. If they look out of level to your naked eye, then they are really messed up. I know people try and do like the place a quarter on the blade, and you can tell from the quarter. I mean, again, if you can tell from that, that just means they're really, really messed up. So just get an edge checker. It's the best way. It's the easiest way. They take 2 seconds to use. Not a big deal. So something you really do want to get. Another, not 100% completely required to use the machine, but required if you want to have nicely finished blades, is something to get the burrs off your blades. So after you sharpen, there's going to be little burrs all on the blades. No matter what kind of steel you have, there's going to be something that needs to be cleaned off of there. This is usually done with some kind of honing stone or like a leather strop. Again, these are consumables. You're going to have to replace them eventually, but they last a super long time. Depending on what kind of material you're sharpening, what kind of blades they are, they can last a ridiculously long time. And you can clean them. I've never cleaned them, but apparently you can clean all this stuff. I would just say buy new ones when they get that worn down. But you can buy them from Sparx. They sell a bunch of different honing stones and the strops. You can buy them from other places, like other hockey places, like Howie's sells them and stuff like that. You can also buy them from places that sell them to sharpen like knives. It's all the same thing. Now, again, this is not the same as those re-edging tools because those are not made to get burrs off. It's a similar thing, but that's not what those are made to do. So honing stones are different than that. Now, when you're buying these, the key is to getting ones that work for the blades you're going to be sharpening. If you have coated steel, high glass steel, black steel, you want something that's not going to scratch or rub off the coating. So you're going to want to get some kind of like a gummy or rubber stone or like a leather strop to clean those up. If you only are ever going to be sharpening regular steel, you can get away with, just a regular honing stone and probably a leather strop still with that. The coated steels do generate less burrs. So like right for myself, I have some of the black blade tech steel. And a lot of times I just use the little strop on them to get off the burrs. I don't even have to use a stone of any sort. So that's a good thing to know too. So look at what kind of steel you're going to be sharpening. If it's just yours, just your family's, if it's your teammates, see what it is. The more steel you sharpen, the more of these kind of accessories that you really need to have. This is also where I think a lot of the stores and stuff that use Sparx don't do this. They don't take the time to properly, get those burrs off. And I have heard and seen people that have taken coated steel to a place that's run through a Sparx, and then they complain because they've like marked up the coating and started to flake it and crack it real bad. But it's not the Sparx doing that. It's their using the honing stones afterward. They're using the improper ones for the coated steel. The only other accessory that I have any experience with is the single blade holder. It's definitely the least required of the ones that I use. You only need the single blade holder if you plan to sharpen any steel without skates, or if you have holders that have a little bit of a warp in them. If your holders have a slight warp in them, you're not going to get a very good sharpening because your steel is going to have a slight warp when it goes into the Sparx. So you could pop out the steel, put it in the single blade holder, and sharpen it through there. It's super simple to use. It's a little twisty mechanism to hold in the steel. Pop it in like you do a skate, run it through, boom, you're done. Real easy. But again, totally not required unless you're going to sharpen steel without skates, or if you find out that skates that you are sharpening do have a little bit of a wave in them or a curl or something so that the steel isn't going in straight. There are other accessories out there that I have never used. They have things for sharpening figure skates, sharpening kid skates, sharpening goalie skates with big old cowls on them. Never had to worry about any of that stuff. But they look like they'd work pretty good. Most of them are just little risers that pop into the blade holder to hold the skates at a better level for sharpening. There are also a lot of people out there making accessories for the Sparx, making like third-party accessories. The two biggest things I've seen is people making accessory holders. So I've seen like little boxes and then little stands that are made to sit on top of your Sparx that hold like the adjustment tool, hold a number of rings, hold the little magnifier for doing the level adjustments, stuff like that, holding, your honing stones and stuff like that. Also, I've seen people make some pretty cool little things for cleaning the inside of your Sparx out. Sparx does make, it's like a rubber, I think, wand. It looks like the butt end of a hockey stick that has a magnet in it. And basically you just move it throughout the inside of your machine. The magnet picks up all the metal shavings. Then you like put it over a trash can, I guess. Pull the magnet out from the middle of it. All the metal shavings fall in the trash can. I've seen people make ones that are similar idea, but they're shaped like a little hockey stick and pick up stuff. It's an easy way to clean out the machine if you don't want to use a vacuum. I've always used a vacuum. There's also, if you don't want to buy something for it, take a sandwich bag, turn it inside out, put a pretty powerful, however powerful magnet you have inside there, go around the inside of the machine. All the stuff's going to stick to the magnet. Turn the bag inside out, right side in, the correct way. And then just pull the magnet out, and all the shavings are sitting in the bag. So, people are coming with cool things for that. All the stuff I've seen that is along those lines is like 3D printed stuff. Usually pretty decent prices on there. But there is stuff out there if you go look around like on eBay and Etsy and stuff like that for those, which, it's kind of fun. Kind of fun to have that. Have stuff stored nicely. I keep all my stuff stored in, it's basically a tackle box. It's a very small tackle box that has different compartments for everything. And it works fine. People use all different kinds of, craft boxes, electrical boxes for holding electrical parts and stuff like that. But anything like that, all kind of works. Also depends how much moving your stuff around. If your Sparx is never moving, you probably don't need anything that you can carry around with you. You can get one of those accessory holders that's made to sit on top of your Sparx and live right there. Or maybe something, if you have a nice setup and you have like a pegboard wall behind you, something that goes onto there that holds everything. But again, totally not required for any of that stuff. Just trying to be handy with how you keep your things organized. All right, now in my time of having Sparx, I've really only had 2 issues. One is, and this is a pretty common issue that I've seen with people, is your skates can start to develop a little bit of a lip, or I guess almost a point if you really sharpen a ton on them at one end. A lot of this, I think, is due to people not setting their height correctly when they're first running them. But the way I've kind of solved this is I just occasionally flip the skates around which way they're sharpening from. Not that big of a deal at all to do that. That seems to almost completely eliminate it. Not 100% eliminate it, but it makes it such a minute thing, and it's so far up on a blade that it's not going to affect you while skating. I have seen online people talking about having this issue, and they talk about taking a Dremel and grinding down like a little nub. But I think at that point, you need to be looking at you're doing something wrong if you're having to take a Dremel to your blades after sharpening. Only other issue that I've had is one of my wheels, and I think I've gone through 9 or 10 grinding wheels. I did have one wheel break. After it was about 3/4 of the way through its life, it had little pieces come off of it. Little pieces off the grinding element came off while sharpening. Never seen that before. Never seen it since. Don't know what happened. But it did. So that's the only thing I've had. The only things I've had have issues with Sparx. The only other, it's almost but not really an issue I have, and this is purely because I have a Gen 1 machine, is the size and weight of it. To move this thing around is a pain in the butt. It's just heavy enough and just bulky enough that it is not easy to move. So I would say if you ever planned on getting Sparx, don't get a Gen 1 if you're ever going to move it. If you want to make it be portable, even if you want to put it in a case and take it with you, get a newer one. The case for the Gen 1 is big. It's bulky. It's got wheels. You need wheels. The Gen 2 has a backpack. You just throw it on your back and take it with you. I would not put the Gen 1 on my back. That'd be awful to carry that thing around like that. So, again, not an issue, but kind of a, I guess, gripe with it. But again, it's a Gen 1 machine. It's their first version of it. Doesn't really bother me. Now, for what I see as the biggest downside of a Sparx is the cost. So I'm going to try and break it down as best as I can for how much I've paid for it and kind of in the future to see if it makes sense for you. Now, Sparx does have a little cost calculator thing online too, but this is the beer leaguer cost calculator. So my Kickstarter deal was $549 for the sharpener with a single wheel. As of right now, the recording of this podcast, a new Gen 2 machine goes for $600 and a Gen 3 for $900. So these aren't cheap. These are not cheap machines. This isn't something on a whim you'd really go out and get. But once you buy the actual machine, you also need to factor in buying an edge checker, buying whatever you're using to finish your steel with, buying whatever, sharpening wheels you need to get, a travel case if you want to get one, so there's stuff on top of this cost. So it's not just, like I said, $600. Oh, it's not too bad, but that's not it. It doesn't stop there. You're probably adding on another $150, $200 on top of it of other stuff to buy. And now with wheels going for $70, and they have steadily gone up since the Sparx came out, this stuff can start to add up. Now, a sharpening wheel lasts something like 150 passes. Sparx never really says how much they last. They give you a range of sharpenings you should get. Sharpening does not equal a pass on the wheel, but it seems to be about 150 passes per wheel. So if you do a little math with that, and you're doing a regular amount of passes with your sharpenings, that costs about $1 a sharpening. Now, around me, sharpenings go for $10 to $15. That's been creeping up a lot too. The $15 ones is a place that uses a Sparx machine exclusively. And they're also a place that has more expensive sharpenings that supposedly basically just do more checking of your skates and like spray like a deodorizer in your skate, stuff like that, which, I'm not paying $10 for them to spray some deodorizer in my skate. That seems ridiculous, but people do. So, okay, if you go with $15, say $15 sharpening is what's normal around you. Say about $1 of it is going towards across the wheel. That means $14 of that, if you're doing it at home, would go back to paying for your Sparx. So you would need to be doing 43 sharpenings to pay back the Gen 2 machine, and that's just the machine. That's not extra wheels, not accessories, or 65 sharpenings to pay back the Gen 3 machine. So if you're just sharpening for yourself, that's a lot. That's a lot of sharpenings. But if you're sharpening for your family, if you're sharpening for your teammates, something like that, you can get through those sharpenings probably in a couple of years, and then you start paying back all the accessories that you bought from that. So definitely at the scale that, like a beer leaguer is doing this stuff at, it's not really a moneymaker. You probably can pay it back and eventually make some money on it, but it's not a moneymaker by any means. But for someone like me who doesn't have access to a lot of people that I trust with my skates, I mean, honestly, I only have one or two people, not even places, one or two people that I would trust around me to sharpen my skates. And one of them, who is the person I like to do it, is about 45 minutes away and isn't there in the evenings usually. And on the weekends when they're there because there's kids tournaments going on. So you're waiting around for sometimes an hour and a half for them to get to like my skates. It's some of that is thrown in there too, because it is a huge time savings. With all that though, is you gotta, like I said, put in the work to make sure you're getting a good sharpening. I think that's the other thing is if you're going to buy a Sparx and try and make money on it or try to make money back on it, you got to know it is not completely a set it and forget it kind of thing. You do have to put a little bit of time and effort into it. And these places that don't do it and they're just using a Sparx, I think it actually makes a lot of sense to buy yourself a Sparx then, because even if it takes a number of years for you to make the money back, you're going to get a better sharpening every time. Kind of on the flip side of all this is I have seen the Sparx and the Sparx products hold their value. I've seen people selling their Gen 1s for, $500 online for the sole purpose of selling the Gen 1 to buy the Gen 2, mostly because they want to travel with it, and the Gen 2 is way better to travel with than the Gen 1. I have also seen people selling wheels that only have a couple sharpenings on them. So going way back to the beginning when I was saying, if you buy a new hollow and you want to try it out at a couple stick and pucks or some open skates just to check it out, and you realize, hey, I hate this hollow, you can probably find somebody to buy it at, a pretty good price. Like I see people selling wheels that, have been used, but they say are, have only had, 10 passes or something on them, or 15 passes on them. And they're selling them for like $50. So while $20 to try out a new hollow isn't great, that's almost what you're paying for a sharpening. If you're paying $15 for a sharpening, and I know where I'm at here in Ohio in the US, that's pretty cheap compared to other places. I know in Canada, people pay more for sharpenings, for sure. So $20 to try out a different hollow, not the worst thing in the world. It's also a way that you can buy some used wheels online. Usually you can find them from people, pay $50, run it on your blades a couple times, go out to, like I said, some stick and pucks or open skates or something like that, which is kind of one of the really nice things having a sharpener at home is you can do that stuff before you go to something like a stick and puck. Try out the new hollow, see if you like it. If you don't, before your next game, put your regular hollow on it and then sell that wheel for probably the same price you bought it for. So that is a really nice thing you can do with the Sparx that you can't do if you have to go to a place and spend, the money every time to get a new sharpening. I do try and stay pretty current with what people are saying and talking about with Sparx online, checking forums and different postings and stuff people put on, on like Facebook or Reddit or whatever, just to see what people are saying, is working, not working. Some people have tips about, like I said, flipping the blade around just to get rid of those little bumps on them, or alternative carrying cases, or like those 3D printed accessories that people are doing, kind of see what's out there with stuff. While I'm doing that, I see a lot of stuff about people complaining with issues that they've had. Not stuff I've had with, but here's other issues I have seen and read people have had with their Sparx. One issue I've seen pop up a lot is with the Gen 1 machines and new wheels. So it sounds like there was a pretty bad batch of wheels that went out that if you use them in a Gen 1 machine, not a Gen 2 or Gen 3, it basically locked up your machine and you had to do a firmware update. Fortunately, I haven't had this issue. I've bought new wheels, haven't seen it happen, but it might, and that sucks. The firmware update seems super easy to get hold of Sparx. Their customer service is really nice. They send you out a little kit, but to do the firmware update, you have to like unscrew the side of the machine, kind of take it apart, plug some stuff in, and run a software update through it. It doesn't seem that difficult, but it's, I don't really want to be doing that with my sharpener. I believe the newer machines have ways to do that kind of over the air, like using the app and stuff, which is a much nicer way and a more modern way to do it. But again, I haven't run into that, read about it. Hopefully it doesn't happen to me. Another huge amount of issues I've seen very recently is with the new Beam Edge Checker. It seems like there's a lot of issues with it. People have issues with it connecting to the app. People have issues with it, powering on, staying powered on, or actually checking edges, actually doing the thing it's supposed to do. A lot of those that I've seen, from what I can tell, think that it's not as much the beam itself not working, but the design of it and the directions to use it are not great. So I think a lot of people aren't realizing how to charge it properly, put it on its charger, how to get it to connect with the app and stuff like that. I think is more the problem than the beam. I haven't seen a lot of stuff that makes me think the beam itself just doesn't work. But there is a lot of people out there having problems with it. Finally, a lot of people, and not as much now, but a lot of people in the last couple years were complaining that the Sparx no longer offers a consumer cross grinding ring. They initially offered one when the Sparx first came out for you to grind flat your hollow. So if you were changing your hollow, you didn't have to use up, one of your regular grinding rings. You had this really aggressive cross grinding ring that you would run through, and it would just kind of flatten out your hollow. This also worked if you were correcting an issue with a skate. If you did have a nick or a gouge or something, you're not just running through a regular hollow. You're using this cross grinding ring to really aggressively just knock off steel. They very quickly stopped making that available for the consumer models. It was available for the pro model for a long time. I don't know if it still is or not, but it was coded to only work with the pro models. But people wanted to have that for their consumer model so that they could use that versus going through their regular grinding rings. And the reason that Sparx stopped doing it is it generated way too much metal shavings and dust in the machines. So it was shortening the life of filters like crazy and just making it super dirty way faster than it should. And people are complaining then that they have to change filters all the time. Again, not a big deal for the pro models because you're hooked up to a vacuum, so just sucks it away. Who cares? But the consumer ones just have a filter, so it's clogging those up super fast. So they got rid of it to kind of eliminate that as an issue. Also, I think a lot of people were using that cross grinding ring way too often and way too much. It sounded like a lot of people were, every time they would change a hollow, were just grinding the crap out of their steel. And that would make a lot of shavings in your machine. So, to eliminate those kind of issues, Sparx just got rid of that for the consumer machines. I never had one. Don't care that I don't have one. Like I said, I don't deal with issues on blades like that. So I don't think it's a big thing. If I have to change hollow, whatever, I don't change my hollow that often to really care about having to grind it down first. I'll run it through the new hollow 10 times or something. That's fine. Totally not something you need, but it is a thing people used to complain about. Now, as more and more new people have gotten Sparx machines, they don't even know that existed, so they're not complaining about it. Obviously not needed. In conclusion, overall, I've loved being able to sharpen my skates regularly, not having to drive 45 minutes to the good sharpener on a Saturday, wait around for him to take care of whatever kids tournament is going on, and then finally get to my skates and then drive 45 minutes back. If only for that reason, owning a Sparx has been a win for me. When I used to take my skates to other places, it was very hit or miss. Honestly, it was usually more miss, and sometimes terribly miss. I had some really bad sharpenings from people. I remember taking it again to play it again because that was the only place around me that was open to get sharpening. I'd gotten new skates. And I just remember hearing the terrible, terrible noise that was coming out of the back room with the kid sharpening. And it was one of those, I wanted to go back there and tell him to stop because I knew I made a giant mistake. But I was in the Learn to Play program at the time, and I went that night with my skates, and I thought I all of a sudden forgot completely how to skate because I could barely stand up. And that's when I learned how bad sharpening can be. So it's nice to not have to deal with it anymore. I also like getting to play around with different hollows, try the flat bottom stuff. I can change my hollow, go to an open skate, try it out, realize, hey, I don't like that. Let me go back to my regular hollow. It can get pricey, but like I said before, you can buy and sell stuff online, and maybe you can find, teammates of yours or somebody's kid that wants to use that hollow that you have. So there's ways to kind of go around that, but that's a really nice and cool, convenient thing to have. I think a Sparx is totally worth it if you plan to sharpen multiple skates. The more skates you sharpen, the more worth it is. And if you actually plan to put a little bit of time into it. Especially, it's worth it if you don't have a convenient access to a good manual sharpener. If you're just a beer legger like me, and you normally sharpen your skates only a few times a year, honestly, it is mostly a pricey gadget that you don't need to have. It's totally a luxury thing. Okay, hope this helps everybody. If you're thinking about buying a Sparx, if you're wondering about Sparx, if you're thinking about buying another automated sharpener, maybe some of these things are things to look at between a Sparx and something else. Let me know. Do you have a Sparx? Have you liked it? If you don't have one, have you thought about getting one? What stopped you from getting it? As always, any likes, subscriptions, and reviews are always appreciated. All right, everybody. See you in the next one.